The charge is always the same, and it always arrives as though it were already settled. Bran Stark had the sight. Bran Stark said nothing. Bran Stark ended up on the throne. Every argument about this ending reaches that sentence eventually, usually in capital letters. I want to prosecute the charge properly, which means the popular version has to go first, because the popular version is the only thing standing between Bran Stark and a conviction. It cannot be proved. It lets him walk. What replaces it is smaller, colder, entirely on screen, and he states it out loud himself, to Jaime Lannister, in a Godswood, when Jaime asks him why he stayed quiet. Search the 8 seasons for a single scene in which the show places a specific future death in front of Bran and then shows him choosing silence. It is not there. His visions of what is coming arrive as fragments, images with no date attached to them, and the show never once confirms that he read any of them as a schedule of events. If the accusation is prophecy, the accusation collapses under the first competent objection, and the defense wins on a technicality it did not even have to work for. So I dropped that charge myself, and what I found underneath it is worse for him. The defensible charge is narrower and far harder to answer. What the show does establish, over and over, and once in Bran's own stated reasoning, is that he held verified present-tense knowledge about the people standing directly in front of him. Knowledge that would have changed what those people did next. And he released it according to a timetable he set himself. Jaime asks him about that directly, and Bran gives him a real answer, and that answer is the spine of this entire case. So the list gets built on a different question. What did Bran already hold, and when did he choose to hand it over? A superpower cannot be judged. A decision can, and every entry from here on is a decision. Before any name goes on the list, the criteria, because a judgment video without criteria is just a mood. A death qualifies only if Bran is shown on screen to possess relevant knowledge before it happens, not implied knowledge, not thematically suggested knowledge, shown. He must also have been within reach of somebody who could have acted on it, and the show must give us his choice, whether that choice is silence or timing or an act. A death he could not have known about, could not have communicated, or was never given the option to effect stays off this list. That rule cost me the most popular name on it, and I am going to pay that price in about 30 seconds. I owe you a correction before the first name, because the version of this list I built first started with Ned Stark, and starting there was wrong. It is the emotionally obvious opening, and it is completely indefensible. When Ned dies on the steps of Baelor's Sept, Bran is a recently woken invalid in a northern castle with no confirmed green sight and no way of reaching King's Landing. The show never once depicts him knowing what is happening there. The same failure runs through Robb, Catelyn, and the Red Wedding entire, which Bran only encounters later as an image of something already finished. Rickon dies in a field Bran has no line into. Shireen burns, while Bran is still inside a tree learning to control what he is. Off the list, all of them. That reduction is not me being generous to him, it is the opposite. Once you strip out every death he genuinely could not have touched, the remainder is short, and a short list has nowhere to hide. There are no coincidences left in it. What survives the cut is 4 deaths in a single room, and Bran was in the room for all of them. Start where his power is defined, in a cave under a weirwood tree, because these are the deaths he is most directly responsible for, and the ones he saw coming least. He has been told, explicitly, by the man training him, that going into a vision alone is dangerous, and that he is not ready. He goes in alone. In that vision he stands among the dead in a field of ice, and the Night King turns and takes hold of his arm, and the mark left on Bran's skin is the thing that cancels the protection over the cave. The wards in those roots hold against the dead until the Night King marks a living greenseer. After that they hold against nothing. What follows is the most expensive 20 minutes of Bran Stark's life, and he does not pay for any of it. Summer dies, covering the entrance. Leaf destroys herself to slow the whites in the tunnel. The three-eyed raven is cut down while Bran is inside a vision with him, so Bran watches his teacher die from inside a memory, and the body falls in the same room where Bran's own body is still sitting. And Hodor, whose mind Bran reaches back and breaks across decades in order to keep a door shut, dies against that door in the snow. Bran survives, and he goes north. Everyone in that room who was not him is gone. 4 deaths, caused, not foreseen. That is the honest label, and I am not going to soften it in either direction. He did not plan any of it. He also did not stop it, could not stop it, and had no warning it was coming. And that single fact is the most important structural evidence in this entire case, because it tells you exactly what shape his power actually has. It reaches backward with total fidelity. Forward, it barely reaches at all. Look at what he does across everything that follows. He enters the past and observes it in detail, hears the conversations, follows the same courtyard across 30 years of it. He occupies the present remotely, riding flocks of ravens over armies and coastlines and reporting what is currently there. His encounters with the future stay what they always were: visual noise, a dragon over a city, fire in a corridor, a moment of screaming. Delivered in floods, he never demonstrates any ability to sort. He is an archive with a live camera feed. He is not an oracle, and he never claims to be one. Before a single case of silence goes on the record, the defense that protects all of them deserves a hearing, because if it holds, nothing that follows counts. The doctrine he is trained under states that the past is written and cannot be unwritten, and the Hodor loop demonstrates the doctrine working. Since Bran's intervention does not prevent the outcome, it produces it. If time is closed, the argument goes, then silence carries no more blame than weather does, because it was always going to be the shape of those events. That defense is coherent, and it applies fully to everything that has already happened. It has no bearing whatsoever on whether a man sitting in a courtyard tells his sister what he knows this afternoon. Fatalism about history is not a license over the present, and the show never once has Bran claim it is. 2 entries on this list run in opposite directions, and I would rather flag that now than have it noticed later. In one of them, his silence takes a life. In the other, it hands one back. Both come out of the same rule, and a rule that can produce either result, depending on who is useful that week, is the only kind of rule worth proving he has. Take him at his return to Winterfell, holding the archive, and watch the first case run. Petyr Baelish approaches him in the Godswood and gets in reply his own private philosophy of chaos and ladders, spoken back to him in Bran's flat voice. Baelish goes white, and he should, because that line was said in a room with one other living person in it. The exchange establishes possession. From that moment we know, and Baelish knows, that Bran holds the complete file, the dagger, the lie that started a war, Lysa Arryn at the moon door, all of it, available, in the same castle as everyone it concerns. He then does nothing with it for a very long stretch of screen time, and the cost of that delay is not abstract. Baelish spends those weeks doing the only thing he has ever done, turning 2 people who need each other into 2 people who suspect each other, and he does it well enough that Arya and Sansa arrive at a point where one of them is holding a blade and talking about faces. Every hour of that happens inside a building where the evidence to end it is sitting in a wheelchair, awake, addressed by both sisters, answering their questions on other subjects. When the file finally opens, it opens in a great hall, in front of the assembled North, at the exact moment its contents convert into an execution and a consolidated Sansa Stark. Withheld, then released at maximum leverage. That is the label, and notice that the outcome was correct. Baelish deserved the floor of that hall. What I cannot call it is innocent, because the weeks that produced it involved his own sisters walking each other to the edge of a killing, in a castle where the answer was available the entire time. The timing was not accidental. The timing is the only part of it Bran actually controlled. Now the receipt this whole case rests on, and the reason I dropped the prophecy charge without regret. Jaime Lannister comes north to fight, is put on trial by the people whose family he helped destroy, and is saved by Brienne's word and by Bran's silence about the one crime nobody in that room knows he committed. Later, in the Godswood, Jaime asks him directly why he did not say it. And Bran does not give him mysticism, or fate, or a riddle. He tells him, in substance, that a dead Jaime Lannister is of no use in the battle that is coming. He kept the crime quiet because the criminal was needed. That is Bran stating his own operating rule out loud, to a man who pushed him out of a window. Information gets released when release is useful, and withheld when withholding is useful, and the standard being applied is usefulness. Every other entry on this list stops being a theory the moment that sentence exists, because we are no longer guessing at whether he does this. He has told us the policy. All that remains is establishing how many times he applied it. There is one moment in all of this that my own argument cannot digest, and leaving it out would make the case look cleaner than the evidence does. During the battle at Winterfell, with the dead in the trees and Theon Greyjoy standing between him and the thing that is coming for him, Bran tells Theon that he is a good man and thanks him. Theon weeps. Then he charges and dies. There is no leverage in that sentence. It buys Bran nothing. It moves no political peace. It was not timed for effect, and the cold archive reading of him does not comfortably explain a man spending his last quiet moment on absolution for someone who cannot help him any further. If you want the strongest evidence that something of Brandon Stark is still in there making choices for human reasons, that is it, and I am not going to explain it away to protect a thesis. The same battle contains the clearest case of a life knowingly spent. The plan to use Bran as bait in the Godswood is a plan Bran himself puts forward, and he puts it forward holding a piece of information nobody else in that war room has. He is the only living person who has watched what happens when the Night King comes for a Greenseer, because he was in the cave when it happened, and he knows the answer is that everyone defending the Greenseer dies and the Greenseer walks out. He has the precedent. He does not describe the precedent. He describes the plan. Theon and the surviving Ironborn are then assigned to that clearing to be the difference between Bran and the thing hunting him, and they are, and it costs almost every one of them. For a long stretch of that defense, Bran is not present in his own body at all, having gone out into the Ravens, which means the man being protected was somewhere else while the protection was being killed. Knowingly spent, with precedent withheld. Calling that murder would be wrong. Calling it innocent would be worse. He selected an arrangement whose historical result he alone had witnessed. The arrangement produced the same result, it worked, and he never told them what he already knew about the price. Which leaves the largest entry, and the one where I have to be most careful with you, because this is where the case can be overstated into nonsense. Bran has known the truth of Jon Snow's birth since a vision at a tower in Dorne. He carries it north. He sits on it through a war council, through a queen arriving in his home, through the entire winter campaign, and he opens it at a specific moment, when Daenerys Targaryen's grip on her own claim has never been thinner, and Jon's northern legitimacy has never mattered more. He does not tell Daenerys. He does not tell the room. He puts it into Jon, privately, and Jon is the least strategic vessel available to him. From there it runs downhill the way water does. Jon tells his sisters against his own judgment. Sansa tells Tyrion. Tyrion tells Varys. Varys begins writing, and Varys is burned for it. Daenerys, isolated, betrayed, watching her last two friends die inside a fortnight, arrives over a city that had already rung its bells for surrender, and does not stop. That is where the sentence Bran chose to release, on the day he chose to release it, finally stopped moving. And the tidy version of that chain is a lie. Every link in it is a separate person deciding for themselves, and benefiting from an outcome is not evidence of having designed it. Bran is never shown anticipating any of it, initiated the disclosure, chose its timing, did not control its propagation. The man who set that stone rolling was in the room at the end, and he was the only person there who had known the contents of it for years. That is a smaller charge than the one you wanted. It is still the largest one on this list. So the defense, properly, and there are 3 arguments in it. The first is the strongest. He tells us himself that he is not Bran Stark anymore, and if the thing in that chair is a repository rather than a person, then it carries no more culpability than a library carries for a book on its shelves. The problem is that a library does not choose its opening hours based on who is currently at war. This one does. He withheld Jaime's crime for a stated tactical reason. He opened Baelish's file on the day it converted into an execution. He released Jon's parentage at a moment he picked, to a person he picked. What goes out, and when it goes out, is the whole of agency, and both of those are his. The second defense is fate, which we have already handled, and which only ever excuses the past. The third one I accept without argument. He never claimed to see the future. He never presented himself as a prophet, and the popular charge against him was built by an audience rather than by the show. That is precisely why I dropped it. The fandom prosecution has spent years trying him for a crime the text does not support, and losing every time. So the claim narrows, and narrowing it is what lets it survive. Not guilty of prophecy. Not guilty of engineering a war, guilty of something smaller and much colder. He sat in rooms with people about to make catastrophic decisions, holding the one fact that would have changed them, and he decided on grounds of usefulness when they got to have it. And then the throne. When Tyrion Lannister makes his case in the dragon pit, and the assembled lords turn to the man in the chair, Bran does not deliberate, and he never asks what the role would require. He asks them why they think he came all that way. It is the single most examined line in the ending, and it is usually read as proof of prophecy, which it is not, because it does not require prophecy to function. A man holding a complete archive of every intrigue, betrayal, and secret in Westeros does not need to see the future to know that the survivors of a war will reach for someone with no army, no heirs, and no visible ambition. He only needs to have read enough history to know what a broken realm always reaches for. He had read all of it. Every succession and every quiet arrangement ever made in a room, going back centuries. Nobody in that dragon pit was better informed about what they were about to do than the man they were about to do it to. The tragedy sits in the arithmetic. The deaths Bran actually caused, 4 of them, in a cave, are the only ones he never saw coming at all. The deaths he could have altered are the ones where he was fully awake, fully informed, in the same room, and quiet. He was never the boy who watched the future arrive and let it happen. He was the one who already had the answers, rationed them, and was rewarded for it with a crown. Which leaves one question I cannot resolve from the text, and it is the one I would rather put to you than answer myself. When he told Theon he was a good man, in the last minute of that man's life, with nothing at all to gain from it, was that the archive being efficient with a dying asset, or was that the last piece of Brandon Stark surfacing for 8 seconds before it went under for good? The scene does not say. I have argued myself into both answers on separate viewings, and I expect to change my mind again.